Local models just got a massive upgrade. Just over the past 2 months, we've seen some really good local models drop that are very capable and relatively easy to run even on just mid-tier hardware. So in this video, I'm going to show you how you can run local models on your own computer and then connect them to tools like OpenClaw so you can genuinely save thousands of dollars per month and no longer need to rely on any kind of cloud provider. Now, I am going to explain this extremely in depth because there are some trade-offs. You need to pick the correct local model, and not everyone should be running local models. It really depends on your use case, what you're looking for, security, and then obviously the type of hardware you have. Anyways, let's dive in. So the experience that you're going to have running local models is really going to depend on the model that you choose and the type of hardware that you're running. Now, I want to go over both, and while it's going to seem a little bit complicated, it's really important to understand this because making the wrong decision here can have a massive consequence and force you to go back to using these cloud-based models, which are going to be really expensive. Now, the first thing to understand is that the local models are open source, or at least most of the case they are. What that means is that these are models that are openly available, that are free to use, that anyone can download, modify, view, doesn't matter, okay? So you're not gonna be able to run, Opus 4.7 locally on your own computer because that's gated by Anthropic and they want you to pay them a massive amount of money to use it inside of tools like OpenClaw. Same with GPT 5.4, whatever the newest model is, you can't run that locally. You have kind of a limited selection, while it is still quite large actually right now. And when you are picking those models, there's only certain models that are gonna be compatible with tool calling or agent kind of orchestration platforms like OpenClaw, which I promise you we're gonna get into. Now, in order to determine which local models you're capable of running, you do need to understand the hardware that you're working with. These models are very demanding on the hardware and specifically on the RAM and the graphics processing unit that you have in your computer. So before we go much further, I'm going to ask you to make sure that you understand the specs of the computer that you're going to use to run this locally. If you're working with a higher end MacBook, what you're going to want to do is just go to the little Apple icon here, go to About This Mac, and you're going to be looking for this number right here, which is the memory. Now, assuming that you have a Mac that's no more than maybe 5 or 6 years old, this is the unified memory that you have available on your entire machine from your CPU, your GPU, and effectively what a local model is going to be able to utilize. It's not going to be able to utilize all of the memory. In this case, I have 32 gigabytes, and probably the highest end model I would want to run would take up maybe 20 gigabytes. Again, we'll look at that in a second, but what you want to find is, okay, if I'm on Mac, how much RAM do I have in my machine? Again, assuming that you're running on a newer MacBook. If you have a machine that's 6, 7, 8 years old, it's gonna be very difficult to run local models, and you're probably gonna have a better experience with cloud just because they're gonna be extremely slow on that lower end hardware. Now, if you're on Windows, the situation changes a little bit. If you're on Windows or even a Linux device, you're going to be looking for your GPU or your graphics processing unit, and specifically how much VRAM is available there. So the RAM in your computer doesn't really matter. It's more about just the VRAM. Again, if you're on Windows, so if you're running a 4090, for example, you might have 24 gigabytes of VRAM. If you're running maybe an older GPU, you might have 8 gigabytes of VRAM. Now, typically speaking, these local models can utilize almost 100% of that VRAM in your GPU. So whatever that number is kind of the upper bound of the type or performance of local model that you're gonna wanna be able to run. Now, we're gonna get into all of the details here, but you wanna understand what operating system am I on. For 99% of you, it's gonna be Mac or it's gonna be Windows. If you're on Mac, you're looking at the total RAM of your device. If you're on a newer Mac, so an M series Mac, and if you're on Windows, then you're gonna be looking at the total amount of VRAM that you have available in your graphics processing unit, assuming that that's an NVIDIA GPU. And again, you're ideally gonna want the highest end hardware you possibly can have. But even if you're running on a relatively budget device, as long as you have VRAM available in the GPU, or again, on a newer series Mac, you still can run these models. Okay, so now that we have that out of the way, the next thing is model selection and actually setting this up on our machine. So what we're gonna do in order to run local models is we're gonna install a tool called Ollama. Ollama allows you to pull down different models and then just run them natively on your own machine. The only limitation for running these models is that hardware that I talked about before. It's completely free, you don't need to pay for anything. And then you can connect this to tools like OpenClaw, which we're gonna do obviously in just a minute. However, before we go any further, I wanna make you aware of a really cool opportunity, especially if you're someone who likes OpenClaw, and it's called ClawComp. Now, Link Ventures is running it, and the short version is they're going to send you a free Mac Mini to build with OpenClaw, where you could run local models. You can keep it no matter where you finish, no matter what happens. The hardware is yours for free. Now, here's how it works. It's a multi-month build program, so it's designed to fit around whatever you're already working on. You apply with a team of 1 to 3 people, you hang out in their Discord, you talk in their Talvi group, and if you stand out, you're in. And then you get 3 months to actually build something real using OpenClaw. So not a wrapper, not a demo that falls apart when someone pokes it, an actual automation with measurable outcomes. Now the whole thing ends with something called Claw Week. This is from June 15th to June 18th in Cambridge, Massachusetts at Link Studios. They fly you out, they cover the housing, and you spend 4 days pushing your project to the finish line in person. Now founders and investors from the Link ecosystem are there, researchers from Harvard and MIT are there, and portfolio companies are walking around meeting teams and evaluating the pitches live. Now the prize pool is $17,500 and the application date closes on May 8th. So if you're a student building something, or you have an OpenClaw project that you've been meaning to take seriously, or if you just want an excuse to go deep for 3 months with a real deadline and real people watching, this is super cool. It's an awesome opportunity. Again, it's free to apply. Link is in the description. Go apply, get in the Discord, stand out, and I hope you guys get the free Mac Mini. Okay, so that said, let's get back to the video here. I want to go through the setup process. So the first thing we're going to have to do here, regardless if we're on Windows, Mac, or Linux, and if you're running on a virtual private server, then same thing. You're going to go over to your terminal, and you're just going to run this command that you can get from the Ollama website. I'm going to leave a link to it in the description, but it's just ollama.com. You're going to copy the install command, and even if you already have Ollama installed, you should run this again to update Ollama because you will need the newest version in order to use the model I'm going to recommend here. Okay, so you open a terminal or command prompt, you paste this command, you hit enter, and it's going to install Ollama for you. Now, like I said, Ollama is just a tool, runs on your computer that lets you run these local models. So we're going to wait for this installation to finish. Once it's done, I'll be right back, and then we're going to pull a local model to our machine. And then once we have the local model running, we're going to be able to actually connect it to OpenClaw. And good timing, it looks like it's already installed. Wow, I was just doing that speech. Okay, so anyways, we have Ollama installed. Now, just to make sure that it's working, we're just gonna type the Ollama command. If for some reason this Ollama command isn't working for you, just close your terminal and reopen it, or close your command prompt if you're on Windows and reopen it, and you should just see something popping up. Like if the command does some output, you're good. And then what you can do is hit escape to exit out of that, okay? So you get out kind of this interactive window. Now, if you're on a virtual private server, which is how I typically recommend running OpenClaw, you're going to want to make sure that the virtual private server has the same hardware that I talked about before, right? So in the case of a Linux machine, you're going to want an NVIDIA GPU with a ton of VRAM. If you have that, then you're going to be able to run the local model on the virtual private server. So the steps that I'm showing you here work on any operating system, whether it's locally on your own computer, whether it's on a VPS, but it requires that you have adequate hardware in order to have a decent experience running these local models. Okay, so now that we have Ollama installed, what we need to do is select the model that we want to download. So what I'm going to recommend is that we use one of the newest, best local models, which is Gemma 4. Now, there's a bunch of other models that you can choose from. At least when I'm filming this video, this is the current smallest and best model that most of you should be able to run. But what we're looking for when we select these models is that they have the ability to call tools. For OpenClaw specifically, you need this. You don't just want a chat-based model. You want one that has tools, thinking, right? All of these different modes like Gemma 4 has. Now, if you want to see all the different models available, you can just go to openclaw.com/search, or just go to the models tab, and you can look and see all of the different models that are here. For example, Gwen 3.6, also another great model, just a little bit larger than Gemma 4. So I'm going to recommend that we go with Gemma 4 for now. So once we've selected that Gemma 4 is what we want, what we're going to run is this Ollama run or Ollama pull. I'm going to show you the command in a second, Gemma 4. This is a command that's going to download the model to our computer, but before you do that, you need to select the size of the model that you want to download. Now you'll notice that if we go to the models down here, we have a bunch of different options. We have Gemma 4 latest, Gemma 4 2 billion, Gemma 4 4 billion, Gemma 4 26 billion, Gemma 4 31 billion, and then the cloud one, which we're not going to look at right now. Now the billion value here is the number of parameters that this model has. The larger the amount of parameters, the better performance of the model, but also the larger size of the model. So really, the thing that you want to look at here is the size, okay? So we see 9 gigabytes, 7 gigabytes, 9 gigabytes, 18 gigabytes, 20 gigabytes. Now, you want to make sure that this size is smaller than the amount of RAM that you have in your computer or that you have available from your graphics card, again, based on what I talked about before, depending on your operating system. In my case, I have 32 gigabytes of RAM, so I'm fine to go all the way up to this 20 GB model, but I wouldn't want to go much higher than that because the bigger the model gets, the slower it's going to be. And again, you need to make sure that it fits inside of the RAM. Now, theoretically, you can run any model you want, even if it was 1 terabyte, as long as you had enough hardware space, but it's gonna be so incredibly slow that you're not gonna be able to really even get any use out of it. So that's why I'm emphasizing that it needs to be small enough that it fits into the RAM and gives you a little bit of a buffer. So that's what we're looking for specifically. You wanna pick the biggest model that your computer is capable of running, okay? So I'm gonna go with, let's just go with the 31B, right? Because that's gonna work for my machine, even though it might be a little bit slow. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to my terminal and I'm gonna type the command Ollama pull, and then I'm gonna paste this Gemma 4 31B. Now for most of you, you're probably gonna wanna go with the smaller one, so you might go with 4 billion, right? Or E4 billion, E2 billion, whatever they've put here for this, right? So you might put E2B, right? Whatever the name is that you see here, you can just directly copy it. What this is gonna do is then start downloading the model on your machine. It's gonna pull all 9, 15, 20 gigabytes, whatever, and then once that's done, we're good to actually run it. Now I already have Gemma 4 on my machine, so I'm not gonna run this command, but if you don't, again, you need to download it first. It might take a few minutes depending on your internet speed. Now, once it's downloaded, what you can do to see all of the models that you have available is to type the command Ollama list. When you do that, it's gonna give you a list of all of the models you've downloaded. You can see that I just downloaded the latest Gemma 4.1 recently, and this is the one that I'll end up using with OpenClaw. But you can see all of these. You can also just go Ollama help. And if you do that, it's gonna give you a list of all of the different commands where you can create a new model, you can pull models, you can sign in, you can copy a model. There's all kinds of advanced stuff. I'm not gonna go into all of the details. The point is Ollama is super cool. There's a lot of stuff that you can do with it. Okay, so now that the model is installed, we can just quickly test it. So we can type Ollama run, and then we're gonna go with whatever the name is. So in my case, I'm just gonna go Gemma 4, but you would put whatever it is that you actually installed. And it should take a second here and then allow you to communicate with the model. So I'm just gonna go hello world, and then you can see immediately I get the response, hello, how can I help you? I'm good, how are you, right? Whatever, I'm doing well, and then it gives me the response, and you can see this is actually quite fast because I'm running one of the lower tier models, just the 9 gigabyte model on my machine, which is capable of running this. Now, if you wanna get out of this window, you can hit /exit. This is just kind of a terminal-based view where you can chat with the model directly if you wanna do that. Okay, so now that we have the model installed, we wanna start configuring it inside of OpenClaw. So first we need to make sure we have OpenClaw installed on our machine. And again, if you're running this on a virtual private server, that virtual private server would need to have the hardware requirements, and you would follow the same steps I just did to install Ollama on the virtual private server. So what I'm about to show you, you just do wherever you have OpenClaw installed, okay? I'm gonna assume that you have it installed somewhere if you're following along with this video. Now, what you can do, right, is we go to OpenClaw. I just ran this command, so I have OpenClaw installed on my machine, and literally all we need to do to get Ollama working with this is we can type OpenClaw configure, okay? So assuming this is installed on our machine, right, I don't recommend running it on your local machine, but for the tutorial, I will show you doing it right here. We're gonna type OpenClaw configure. Maybe you guys have a Mac Mini or something, so you're gonna do that directly on there. And what we're gonna do is go through and we're gonna select model. Okay, so where it says model, we're gonna use our arrow keys, we're gonna press enter, and we're gonna select down here. Mine's a little bit laggy when it first pops up, but we're gonna go down all the way to where it says Ollama. You should see it popping up as an option. Now, once it pops up, we're gonna go with just local only. We don't wanna use the cloud one. I'm not gonna get into that in this video. Ollama has a cloud offering, but I don't recommend using it. We're gonna go local only. We're just gonna leave the base URL as it is. We don't need to change this. And continue, and we're gonna select the model that we wanna use with Ollama. Now, I apologize for the cut here, but I just wanted to mention that if at this point, for some reason, Ollama is not appearing or it's showing I can't reach the server or there's some issue, then what you're gonna wanna do here is quit out of this. You can hit Control-C, and you wanna just run the command Ollama serve. Now, when you run Ollama serve, this is just gonna start the Ollama service on your computer. It's gonna run directly in this terminal window, so just don't close it, and then you should be good to go. Now, you probably don't need to do that. You also can just go to your Spotlight search if you're on something like Mac, and you can just run Ollama. So you can just literally run the application, and you should see you get like a little llama icon popping up in the top, meaning that it's running in the background. Okay, so you can see that we have a bunch of options here. I'm just gonna check this Ollama Gemma 4 latest as well as Gemma 4. You can select all these different models. You can see I have a bunch of them, right? Because these are all the ones that were installed on my machine. And I am just gonna go ahead and press on confirm, okay? So you just select the model that we just installed, or whatever you picked. For most of you, it's gonna be that Gemma 4. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and press enter, and now both those models, or whatever ones we've selected, are gonna be enabled in OpenClaw. So I'm gonna press on continue, and then what we're gonna do is just restart the gateway so that this model will now be available to OpenClaw. So we're gonna go OpenClaw, and then gateway, restart. Okay, Now, when we run that command, it's going to restart the gateway. Both these models should then be available. And then what we can do is just start using them directly inside of OpenClaw. Now, the same thing goes for Windows. You can run the Ollama serve command, or you can just go down to your Windows, like application, search bar, whatever you want to call it, and then you can just run Ollama, and it should run automatically in the background for you. Okay, so you want to make sure that's running as a background process. Now, once we do that, we can go back to our OpenClaw control. Again, I'm going to assume you know how to get here because you already probably set up OpenClaw before. And what we can do is just ask it a question. So I can say something like, hello, how are you doing? Can you tell me the meaning of life? Right? And you'll notice that by default, if you haven't selected any model, it should just be using Gemma 4. And if we go enter here, it should just be using this model, and you can see we get the response very quickly. Now, if for some reason you have different models connected, you probably want to set the default model to be Gemma 4. In order to set the default model, you can typically do that from the config. I don't know exactly where the configuration is for the default model, but I believe in the openclaw.json file, there is a way to set the default model to just use this local model here, and then you're kind of good to go. Now, what I typically will do when I'm using this is I might have a local model that I use most of the time, and then I also configure a cloud model if I want to do something that's a little bit more challenging, that requires some higher intelligence. Because while these models are good, they are going to be stupider than like an Opus 4.6 or an Opus 4.7. So you probably want to use them in combination unless you purely just care about privacy and you just want everything running 100% locally. So my suggestion is you configure like an OpenAI model, an Anthropic model, and then the local model, you set the local model as your default, and then you switch to the other model when you want to use that. Now, what you can do is you can actually type /model here, right? And then you can change the model that you want to use. So I just do /models, it will give me a list. You can see that right now we just have 2, and then I can say /model, and then, Gemma 4, right? And then switch over to actually use that model. Now, in my case, I'm already using it, so there was no switch, but you also can just directly tell it, hey, I want to switch over to use Gemma 4. Can you switch the model? And then OpenClaw should be capable of just running the command and automatically switching the model for you. You can see it called the tool, and then it's going to switch it over. Now, in this case, it's saying it can't do it again because we only have that one model. Now, by the way, if you are wondering what I'm using to dictate here, I'm using a really cool tool called Whisper Flow. I can quickly click into it and kind of show you what it looks like here if we go to the settings. But effectively, it's the best kind of voice dictation. It uses AI in the background extremely fast. I actually have a long-term partnership with them. They're free to try out, and I just use them anyways, which is why we have the partnership. You can see my words per minute here, and I'll leave a link to it in the description in case you guys want to try it. But especially if you're working with a lot of these AI tools, it's just much faster to speak rather than to type, right? So if I want to say something, hey, I want you to go do this, here's a bullet pointed list of A, B, C, D. Right, and then we go, and it just gives me whatever and automatically formats it, fixes the spelling, punctuation, all of that kind of stuff. So anyways, that's pretty much all that I have for you guys in this video. Setting it up with OpenClaw is very easy. It's a matter of having Ollama installed and then just configuring the model. If you want to go further, you can set up inside of like your sol.md file as well as your agents.md file and all of the configuration in OpenClaw, and you can tell it when to use the local model versus when to use the cloud model. You can install multiple local models, right? So maybe you want Gemma 4 for something, maybe you want Gwen for something else, maybe there's a specific image or video model you want and you install that. You can go crazy with the configuration. The important thing is really understanding that hardware constraint. And again, the performance and speed that you're gonna get is gonna be dictated by that hardware in combination with that model selection. Probably you just want Gemma, but you can mess around with some other ones and see what experience you get. In my case, Gemma is much, much, much faster than a lot of the other kind of best local models that are currently out there. So that's it, guys. I'm gonna wrap up the video here. If you enjoyed, make sure you leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.